Hello, good evening, and welcome to the live virtual public meeting to discuss Central Avenue between Bethany Home Road and the Arizona Canal. Thank you so much for taking the time to be with us virtually tonight. My name is Ashley Patton, and I'm with the City of Phoenix Street Transportation Department. I am excited to be your host and MC tonight. Before we begin, if you'd prefer to listen to this meeting in Spanish, we do have a live translator available. I'd like to introduce Albert Granillo for those instructions. Albert.
Sí, buenas noches. Si usted desea escuchar esta junta en español, por favor marque el número 602-534-1000. Luego le van a pedir el número de la reunión, que será el 63519, y luego el símbolo del número. Thank you, Ashley.
Thank you, Albert. I'm also joined by several members of the Street Transportation Department. I'll let the panelists introduce themselves and their relation to this project in the order listed on the slide.
Good evening. I'm Keeney Knudsen. I'm the Director of Street Transportation for the City of Phoenix. Our department is responsible for all the city streets, and that's why we're here this evening.
Good evening. My name is Brianna Velas, and I'm the Assistant Street Transportation Director, and I oversee the division responsible for active transportation.
Good evening, everybody. My name is Mark Locke. I'm the Deputy Director for our Programming and Project Delivery Group, the team that's responsible for this project.
Hi, I'm Marielle Brown, and I am the Project Manager for this project.
Good evening, everyone. I'm Carl Langford. I am the Traffic Operations Engineering Supervisor, and as such, I look at a lot of the traffic and patterns of these impacts with the projects.
Thank you, everyone. I will quickly outline the agenda for tonight's virtual meeting. The items highlighted in yellow, for those of you who can see the screen, are opportunities to hear from you and provide public input. So first, I'll talk about how to provide input. We will hear from the department director. We'll hear from you and hear from the audience this evening who's joining us in this virtual room. We'll talk about the public meeting goals and ground rules. We'll talk about the project schedule and context for this proposal. We'll hear from you and your priorities. We'll go into the details about the proposed changes. We'll take a poll on those proposed changes, and then we will go to a live Q&A session for those that pre-registered to speak. So quickly, we want to encourage all public input throughout this process, and thank you so much to those of you who have already provided input on the proposed changes. We are including every call to the project hotline and every email received to our project team as part of this process. But during and after the meeting tonight, there are a few additional ways to provide input on this project. This is just the beginning of the public input process. First, we'll be taking a few polls via WebEx. So those of you participating through a web-enabled device will be able to take part in those. Second, any comment received through the chat box in WebEx will be included in our summary. Unfortunately, we are not able to respond to every chat received through the chat box, but please know that your comments will be included. And lastly, please take the project survey. A survey will be available on the project webpage following this meeting through June 11th. That is the best mechanism to provide input on this project. Share it with your neighbors, family, and friends. And at the end of this presentation, we will call on those who pre-registered to ask a question live during the meeting. Any other questions received will be compiled and included in a FAQ on the project website next week. Okay, now that we are all up to speed, no transportation pun intended, it's my privilege to turn it over to the Street Transportation Department Director, Keeney Knudsen, for some opening remarks.
Thank you, Ashley. First of all, before I start with my remarks, I just wanted to thank everybody who's in attendance virtually at this meeting. I know it's difficult as we're coming out of this pandemic. We've been doing our best to reach out to the public when we have public projects that we need to get community engagement, and this is no different. And so we appreciate everybody's flexibility and adaptability to the formats like this. And sometimes we hope that actually this promotes better community engagement rather than the opposite. But so I did want to just thank you for all your time and spent in this meeting this evening. And we're going to do our best to be able to value your time and be able to get through this meeting as quickly as possible and get your feedback and your questions answered as much as we can here in this forum. So the first thing I wanted to talk about is, and there's been a lot of questions about the context about why we're even talking about bike lanes on Central Avenue and this stretch of Central Avenue. The first thing I just wanted to go back is talk about the city in itself has developed complete streets ordinance policies. And you may ask what complete streets is. It's really looking at streets and designing them and looking at them from all users' perspectives, for vehicle drivers, for bicyclists, for pedestrians, any way that people want to get around using the roadway. And so those give us goals to be able to look at when we're looking at our streets and how we modify them, adjust them over time. And then if you remember, about 5-6 years ago, we had the overwhelming support from Phoenix voters who passed Transportation 2050, which had a goal out of establishing 1,000 or more than 1,000 new bike lane miles across the city. So that's an ambitious goal. And so that's one of the reasons why we're also looking at this as well. And then more recently, our city council supported a $200 million advancement of pavement maintenance projects across the city to be able to put our pavement in better condition. So all those things kind of come together to be able to look at opportunities to be able to install bike lanes where we might be able to do that across the city. And Central Avenue is no different. What makes Central Avenue a little bit different is we actually had some community interest and support for doing a lane reduction in this area. Now, I would tell you that we would look at types of projects like this, and my team's going to tell you this later as well. We look at for all opportunities to be able to look at bike lanes and look at for traffic impacts and lane reductions and things like that you're going to hear about this evening. So it's normal for us to go about this, but we did want to be able to respond to some of the community input we had received about who had interest in this. But secondly, I wanted to talk about the public engagement process. Our department, we don't do things in a vacuum. We go and talk to people and get their feedback on major changes like this. And so as part of our process, whenever we're going to be affecting lanes of travel on a roadway, whenever we're going to potentially affect on-street parking, whenever we're going to have protected bike lanes, which is a big issue sometimes, is we want to be able to get people's feedback and input. So we hold public meetings like this to be able to get that input and feedback. So this is no different. It's not something abnormal that we do. It may just be a very important topic to a lot of you. I know we have a lot of people in attendance this evening. So as we make decisions like this with bike lanes and travel lanes, as we're going to be talking about this evening, it is really a value proposition. And so it's really the value of our Phoenix residents, our businesses, our visitors, about what they want to see on their city streets. And so this is a decision we're making tonight to be able to hear about is a value proposition of travel lanes or potentially impacts if we look at opportunities to be able to install bike lanes on a roadway like this. But I do encourage your feedback, and I'll emphasize that no matter whether you speak this evening, are you a registered speaker or you're just here attending, I would encourage you to fill out the survey, provide an email feedback, whatever it might be, because we're going to treat all those the same way. And we'd really like to emphasize tonight for the comments that happened tonight is really about any questions you may have about what we're proposing to do and any other things that may seem unanswered by our presentation this evening. So without further ado, I've spent enough time doing an introduction here, and I'll turn it over to the project team to give into the details of the proposal that we're going to be talking about this evening.
Thank you so much, Keeney. Since we cannot physically be together and see our colleagues and neighbors in the room, I'm going to open the first poll of the night to allow us some insight as to who is in the virtual room with us. So you should now see a poll on your screen if you are joining by a web-enabled device. And if you are not, I encourage you to just think about how you are connected to the project area. Select all that apply. Do you live nearby, commute through the area, own a business nearby? And if the options don't reflect your relationship with the project area, go ahead and enter it in the chat box. And as soon as that poll closes, I will share the results. Thank you so much for participating. And you should be able to see those poll results now. It looks like we have 39% of commuters 4% business owners, and 85% residents, as well as a handful of other responses. So thank you so much for participating in that first poll. So what are we trying to accomplish tonight? It's simple enough. The goal of this virtual public meeting is to share the proposed changes to Central Avenue with the community that uses this roadway and then gather input from that community. I do want to share just a few ground rules for this virtual meeting. First, please consider small scale and large scale effects of this proposal. We have nearly 5,000 miles of roadways in the city of Phoenix, and as we share the context and background of this proposal, we hope that you'll consider not only how the proposal would directly impact you, but the overall surrounding community and transportation network as well. Second, please share your thoughts. We're asking for you to please participate in the polls and fill out a survey after the event. And lastly, if you pre-registered to ask a question live, we have a strict time limit to be respectful and inclusive of everyone who did register. So please keep your comment or your questions to 1 minute, 2 minutes at the very maximum. And without further ado, I will hand it over to our project manager, Marielle Brown.
Hey, thank you and good evening, and thank you for the wonderful introduction, Ashley. So tonight I'm going to give you an overview of the proposal, and then I will hand it off to my colleague, Carl Langford, to talk about the engineering aspect. So first, I want to go over the proposed schedule. So as Ashley mentioned, the survey will be open tonight through June 11th. Please take the survey, share it with your friends and neighbors. It's the best way to give us feedback. Based off of what we hear from the community, the Street Transportation Department will make a decision, and we'll share that decision in fall of 2021. And then what we're talking about tonight is a restriping project that is linked to a roadway treatment. So the roadway treatments will happen no matter what. So the first roadway treatment is phase 1 from Bethany Home Road to Northern will happen in fall or late 2021. And the second phase will happen in spring or summer of 2022. And again, these are the roadway treatments. These are on our schedule, and these are things we're looking to do to improve the pavement quality. What we're talking about tonight is what will the stripes look like after these treatments are done. So as Teeny talked about, this is part of the Transportation 2050 program. We review all of our pavement projects for the possibility to put in bike lanes, to expand existing bike lanes, or other safety improvements. This supports our complete streets policy that asks us to look at our streets for all modes and make sure we're supporting the safety of our residents. It also gives us the opportunity to connect our active transportation network. And in this case, it's something that we have heard from community members over the years that they're interested in an opportunity to look at reconfiguration of this roadway. And so now that we have the pavement projects coming up, we're excited to get the opportunity to go out to the community at large and hear from everyone on what they think about this proposal to look at a different striping configuration. So Central Avenue is a unique street in the city of Phoenix. It's an arterial, but most of our arterials are on a mile grid. Central is actually between 7th Street and 7th Avenue, so it's a half mile from the two nearest arterials. It also ends at the Mountain Preserve. So north of Nunlap, it becomes a residential street and ceases being an arterial street. Over the years, we've also reconfigured Central in several ways. We added light rail from downtown Washington Jefferson to Camelback Road. And now we're expanding the light rail south to Baseline. There are also existing buffered bike lanes from Camelback to Bethany Home Road, just south of where we're looking at tonight. So tonight, we're talking about the proposal area of Bethany Home Road to the Arizona Canal. And before I dive into the details of the proposal, I wanted to hear from you and what your priorities are for this section of Central from Bethany Home Road to Northern Avenue. So another poll should pop up on your screen. And looks like it'll take just a just a second. All right. So the polls on your screen, please take a minute to reflect on what your priorities are and select the top 3 priorities for this section of Central Avenue for you. So thinking about Central Avenue, Bethany Home Road to the Arizona Canal, please select your top 3 priorities: reducing vehicle congestion during rush hour, preventing collisions that could injure people or cause fatalities, minimizing the cost of building and maintaining streets, giving everyone a comfortable option for using streets, whether they are driving, walking, biking, or taking transit, designing streets to match the atmosphere of the neighborhood, providing green and sustainable transportation options, or other, and you can enter that in the chat box. And I would also encourage you to take the survey to give us more information on what your priorities are. So we're going to give everyone about 30 more seconds to fill in what their priorities are, and then we'll be able to see what everyone says. And as Keeney said in his introduction, the decision that we're talking about tonight is really a values decision. It's about what we want to see on Central the most and how it matches our community's values. So the most important question is for you: what are your values and your priorities when it comes to Central Avenue? All right. And in just a minute, I will be able to read off what everyone said. So it looks like the top answer is preventing collisions that could injure people or cause fatalities, followed by reducing vehicle congestion during rush hour, and then giving everyone a comfortable option for using streets, whether they are driving, walking, biking, or taking transit. Thank you for taking the poll. And please keep your answers in mind as we talk about the proposal. All right, so right now, Central Avenue from Bethany Home Road to the Arizona Canal has 4 lanes of travel, 2 going southbound, 2 going northbound. The proposal is to add a 2-way center turn lane that will give people the opportunity to wait and turn left, and add buffered bike lanes. In order to make room for this, we would be removing 1 northbound and 1 southbound lane of traffic, or of motor vehicle traffic. So right now, and of course in future, the Central is widened at the intersections where there are traffic signals at the major streets. And it's widened, the pavement widens out, and there's a dedicated left turn lane. So right now, the proposed changes would, of course, include that left turn lane. And then there's also the opportunity to add a shared bus and bike lane, so the buses would be able to pull over to let people out. And this is at the major intersections where there's signals. It also gives room for a dedicated right turn lane that is a shared bus and right, or a shared bike and right turn lane. This is a design that we've used all over the city. Right. And so the proposal phases are phase 1, fall of 2021, we'd be looking at making any changes from Bethany Home Road to Northern Avenue in the fall of 2021, followed by a pavement project in the spring of 2022 from Northern Avenue to the Arizona Canal. And I want to be clear, these pavement projects are going to go forward, but what we're talking about tonight is a proposal to either restripe the street as it currently is, or to stripe the street with the proposed changes. So why are we proposing changes? And the first thing is really, well, one thing is really that we're always looking for those opportunities to expand and to connect our active transportation network. This project would connect the existing bike lanes on Central to the Arizona Canal, and we have seen a huge increase in interest in our canal paths over the last year and a half. There's also an opportunity for safety improvement that I will let my colleague Carl Linford talk about that from an engineering perspective. As Keeney mentioned, this is also something that we've heard from the neighborhood over the years. We've heard requests to look at a possible reconfiguration. And then finally, as I mentioned, it does connect to the canal path, and there's a lot of demand for people to be able to walk and bike on the canal. So when we're looking at these decisions about bike lanes, we're also looking at who we're designing for. Right now, for people who are biking on Central Avenue, if they're not biking on the bridle path, it's really only for the most confident bicyclists who would want to share the street with cars. What we're looking at as a proposal is something that would add buffered bike lanes and really open it up to a much wider array of people who are interested in bicycling. And so that's one of the reasons why we're looking at this proposal. To discuss the safety and the traffic impacts, I'm going to hand it over to Carl Langford, my colleague.
Thank you, Marielle. So one of the things that we always look at when we have a 4-lane roadway is the safety aspects. Research basically shows that actually you can receive a 47% reduction in collisions when you transition a 4-lane roadway, 2 lanes one direction, 2 lanes the other, to a roadway that is a 1-1-1, so a center turn lane with 2 single lanes going north and south. So also one of the benefits that comes from the safety aspects is a reduction in speeding as well. So as the prudent driver, oftentimes is the one that's setting kind of that speed for people along the roadway. And then, of course, as we've kind of talked about, it does provide dedicated space for people bicycling and for people turning left in the area. So as we talk about safety, I want to talk about 3 specific types of crashes that happen on 4-lane roadways that as we transition to a 3-lane roadway, it improves. So the first one is really a rear end. The car in front of you, they need to turn left. They put on their blinker. Hopefully you're paying attention and you have sight distance and you can slow down and stop. But oftentimes people aren't, and they rear end potentially the person in front of them. As you transition to a 1-1-1, that vehicle turning left gets to be able to turn into a left turn lane, and traffic can continue past that unimpeded. So the next type of collision that happens as well is what we call a side swipe in safety aspects. And that's where, again, that car in front of you, it's slowing down, it stops to turn left. Hopefully you're paying attention, but sometimes you may not be, and you're like, oh, somebody's there, and then you go and just try to maneuver out of the way, and you aren't realizing there's a car next to you that you end up side swiping into. So this is another type of collision specifically that as a 2-way center turn lane happens, that left turning vehicle gets out of the path of other vehicles on the roadway. So, and then the last type of collision is actually your left turns. So here potentially what you have is 2 vehicles that are looking to turn left on driveways that are near each other. You know, and this one car here is actually blocking the sight of the other car. And so a vehicle ends up turning left, and that causes a collision as well on that. So overall, that's why we can see, and research shows, that you get nearly a 47% in reduction as you make these changes from a 4-lane roadway to a 3-lane roadway. So then to talk a little bit about our traffic analysis. So what we did is we did a traffic analysis. So first of all, you have to go out and collect data. So there are 5 intersections throughout this section. So what we did is we went out and we collected data at each one of these intersections. The data we collect is turning movement counts. How many cars are going straight, how many cars are turning right or left for all 4 directions of the area. So we collected this data in February of 21 for all of these intersections except for Dunlap, which we had in March of 18. And then what we do with that data is we put it into a traffic analysis model, and that evaluates what can happen. And with that, we see the results here. So in the morning hour, we look at this top diagram here. And again, this isn't representative of necessarily specifically Central Avenue, but you can look at the average delay at the signal. And average delay, that's the delay that all vehicles that approach and go through that intersection see a delay. And so the overall added delay in the AM peak is somewhere between 1 and 4 seconds. Now, of course, the heavier impact is going to be for that southbound in the morning hours. And so in the southbound, that's this lower diagram here. So all the vehicles that want to go south through that intersection, the average delay happens at the signals is from 2 to 7 seconds. So, and that 7-second delay is actually at Bethany Home Road and Central Avenue. So then as we look at the afternoon or the peak in the afternoon time frame, next slide, please. We see here again, we have all the average of all the vehicles that approach the signal. That average ends up between 1 to 8 seconds as we do this analysis. But of course, the bigger question is, again, the northbound, because that's where really we're reducing the lanes of traffic. So in northbound, you can see an added delay of anywhere from 2 to 35 seconds. So, and again, that 35 seconds, that happens at the Glendale and Central intersection. So now one of the things to note about this model is this is information. What we do is we put the information in, we run the model based on existing configurations, and then we run the model with the modifications. It doesn't take into account any diversion or people taking a different route or an alternate route. Most of the time when we see these type of projects, we do see a reduction in traffic. Many times throughout the country, research says that that reduction typically comes very close back to what the traffic was within about 2 years time frame. So, Marielle, I turn it back to you.
Great, thank you, Carl, and thank you for that great presentation and summary of the safety and traffic impact. So just as a summary, before we go to the final poll and then the questions and answers, I want to do a summary of what we've heard tonight. So there will be some increases and some decreases in the proposed changes. So we'll see an increased space for turning left and increased space for bicycling, along with increased safety, but also increased traffic delay at busy times of the day and potentially increased traffic diversion at busy times of the day. At the same time, we'll see decreased points of conflict. Carl showed the different ways that you'll have fewer points of conflict as you drive on the street. We'll see reduced weaving around left-turning vehicles because the left-turning vehicles will have a lane to sit in. We'll also see decreased delays behind left-turning vehicles because, again, the left-turning vehicles will no longer be in the through lane. And we'll see a reduced risk of collisions and reduced numbers of cars driving over the speed limit, as speeders will no longer be able to pass the cars driving the speed limit. So with that, the final question is, thinking back to the priorities that you identified at the beginning of this meeting, does the proposed design meet your priorities for Central Avenue? This will work just like the other polls. A question box will pop up in a second, and please take the time to tell us how well the proposed design meets your priorities for Central Avenue. And it looks like it'll take just a second for the question box to pop up. All right, great. So thinking about your priorities for Central Avenue, how well does the proposed design meet your priorities? Is it A, very similar to my priorities, B, similar to my priorities, C, somewhat similar to my priorities, D, neither different from or similar to my priorities, E, somewhat different from my priorities, F, different from my priorities, and G, very different from my priorities. So please take a minute to think back to what you identified, what your values are for your street, and how the proposed changes do or do not meet those priorities and values that you've been thinking about. I'll have 10 more seconds to fill out the poll, and when it closes, I'll be able to share the results with everyone. Thank you. And in just a minute, very quickly. So it looks like the top answer is very different from my priorities at 32%, and the second highest answer is very similar to my priorities at 24%. So thank you for sharing your information with us. It looks like overall there are more people saying this is different than similar. I would encourage you to take the survey so you can let us know more about what your priorities are and what you would rather see on Central Avenue. So again, the survey will be open through June 11th. It opened already, or it should have opened already on our website. And we will be using the survey and what we hear from public outreach to make a decision. That decision will be shared in the fall of 2021, and following that, we will be doing 2 roadway treatments, phase 1 from Bethany Home Road to Northern Avenue, and then phase 2 from Northern Avenue to the Arizona Canal. And again, what we're talking about is, do we want the striping to stay the same, or do we want it to change? The roadway treatments are to address pavement maintenance and pavement quality, and so they will happen regardless. So when we share the decision, we will be updating our website, and we'll also be sending it out via email. There are many ways to make sure that you'll get the email notification. First, if you registered for the meeting tonight using your email, you will receive that web update on the notification. When you take the survey, you can opt into sharing your email address, and that will also allow us to notify you with the decision. If you aren't comfortable sharing your email address either of those ways, you can email Albert Granillo at agranillo@gciaz.com to ask to be put on the notification list, or you can call the project hotline at 623-825-3444. So with that, I will hand it over to Ashley.
Thank you so much, Marielle. We will now enter our live Q&A session. This time is reserved for our project team to answer questions from those that pre-registered to speak. We do have over 50 people pre-registered. I will call on those individuals and unmute them. But to be respectful of everyone's time, please keep your comments or your questions to about 1 minute, 2 minutes at the very maximum. We will be following a very strict 2-minute limit to be respectful of everyone's time. We also ask that you use this time for questions only, and if your question has already been asked, to consider yielding your time. And if you have a comment to provide, please remember that the best mechanism to provide that comment is through the project survey. Well, we're also including emails, hotline calls, all of the different mechanisms will be included, but that survey is the best mechanism. We will also be including all input received as part of this outreach process, including that in the chat box. And I apologize in advance if I butcher anyone's name. I appreciate your grace with me as I go through these 50 people pre-registered to speak. So first, I will call on Alex Malkoon, and then Andrew Smigelski, and then Chuck Wetstein. So first, Alex, I will find you and unmute you now. Please go ahead.
Okay, thank you very much, Ashley and Director Knudsen, and thank you everyone for providing this forum. My name is Alexander Malkoon. I live at 245 East Rose Lane between 3rd Street and Central Avenue. I'm the past chairman of Alhambra Village Planning Committee and have spent a great deal of time with the city on many different committees. Let me just say, if I may, I appreciate and agree with any community, any neighborhood who wants to mitigate traffic. And I can't tell you how much I agree with the intent behind what we're trying to accomplish on traffic dieting on Central. The challenge here is this: I've lived on Rose Lane in that section for 23 years, and we haven't had a traffic study between Central and 7th Street in almost 2 decades, despite my requests from Terry Wilcoxon, Ray Davalos, each city administration. And so here we are wanting to do something really good, but yet we have not had a comprehensive approach between 7th Avenue and 7th Street, between Northern and Bethany Home Road in decades. And the east-west traffic that's going to be impacted by this is going to increase and be exacerbated by what we already have seen over the past couple of decades. I would ask you to think about the reverse of what we're trying to do. We're doing an inside-out approach, reducing traffic and doing some good things on Central at the expense of what's going on between Central and the half mile to 7th Avenue and 7th Street, whereas we ought to be doing the reverse. Think about the Willow neighborhood and what was done along Central to mitigate traffic ingress into Willow. And what we need to do is look at each of the streets that are quarter mile, half mile, and other streets that connect to Central and see what we can do to mitigate traffic coming in. For instance, if you look at Coulter at 16th Street and Coulter coming off the 51, you have
Mr.
no
Malkoon,
ingress.
are you able to wrap it up? We're at over 2 minutes.
Thank you. We have no ingress. So if you did something like that at Rose Lane and 7th Street, you would be reducing traffic on Central. I say look at the outside periphery of North Central as it abuts 7th and 7th and reduce that traffic coming in, which will ameliorate traffic on Central. I ask you to delay this decision for at least a year until we have a comprehensive east-west approach to this. Thank you very much for your time.
I'm looking now for Andrew Smigelski, and I'm not seeing him. Andrew, if you're here, please enter in the chat. Maybe you're registered under a different name. And I'm going now to Charles Wetstein. Charles, please go ahead. Chuck, you are unmuted, but we cannot hear you. Go ahead and enter into the chat box. Mr. Wetstein, I'm sorry we can't hear you. I will go now to Eric and then Ian Thrasher. Eric you are unmuted.
Yes, Ashley, thank you very much for your time and concern with this project this evening. As we've heard, a lot of great things are looking forward to being done in the North Central area, but I have some of the similar concerns with the prior gentleman as far as I agree with the intent, but there are some unintended consequences. I'm a 25-year resident of North Central. I live in Medlock Place between Camelback and Bethany Home on Central, and I've worked with Kerry Wilcox in the past on the road diet that we implemented after the light rail construction and the bike path that was put in from Central to Camelback. And it helped because after the light rail construction was completed, the widest stretch of Central in the entire city was between Bethany Home and Central, primarily between Missouri and Camelback. And we had a severe problem with people as the road widened up. Coming south, it was 2 lanes each direction. As the road widened up at Missouri, we had a tremendous problem with speeding. As you know, over the last 2 decades, the neighborhood has grown tremendously. I would venture to say that within 5 miles of the Camelback Central intersection, there are probably an additional 50,000 residents in the last 10 years, more or less, and a lot more traffic. We have a lot more businesses. The restaurant district here at between Missouri and Camelback is a tremendous asset to the neighborhood. I know that there have been 2 pedestrian deaths due to speeding in that area. And so my biggest concern is that should the road be shrunken up there, which I agree with the intent to limit traffic up there, but in the past when the road has changed size in this area, that has led to increased speeds, particularly between Bethany Home and Camelback. And so that's my biggest concern. Central Phoenix is known for the Saturday night cruises. So when you put the light rail in, we still have cruises now and a lot of development downtown, but we still see a tremendous amount of speeding in the area that is widest without any restrictions, which is between Bethany Home and Camelback. So my big concern is that the city would definitely look at what they can do. I think that what Carl Langford said today was important as far as the things that he's looking at, reducing collisions, and reducing speeding in the area that's going to be restriped or looking to be restriped. But that has unintended consequences, and I've experienced it over my last 2+ decades living on Central Avenue.
Thank you very much. You're over 2 minutes.
Okay. Thank you very much for your time, and I look forward to seeing how this project progresses.
Thank you very much. And as a reminder for those as well, if we could try to focus on questions that have not been answered during the presentation so that we can get through all 50 folks that are registered. I'm going to now unmute Ian Thrasher.
Hi, thank you. I appreciate this opportunity. Was concerned before this, concerned even more after this. I didn't hear anybody mention homeowners as a stakeholder in this process, and that's concerning to me. I live in a neighborhood that is only accessible off of Central Avenue, and there's dozens of homes, and I know dozens of other communities on Central that are like that, where this is the only point of ingress or egress from the entire neighborhood. And so my concerns are mostly, I agree with the first speaker that we need a traffic study, but none of the SketchUps or conversations that we've had revolve around how does one get out of their residential driveway or into their residential driveway without obstructing the now single travel lane going northbound or southbound. I understand that there's going to be bus pullouts and bicycle pullouts, but we already have the pedestrians on the bridle path to contend with. Now you're going to put a dedicated bicycle traffic lane. So to get out of my house, I already have to stop and make sure there are no pedestrians. Then I'm going to pull a little bit more forward and stop and make sure there's no bicycles. Then I'm going to pull a little bit more forward and stop and make sure there's no cars. And hopefully I can see what's going on in the middle lane to pull into to get into that. My concern is how am I ever going to reasonably turn left out of my house? And then the same problem getting back in. There's so many driveways off of Central. If there are pedestrians on the bridle path and this bicycle lane is as popular as you think it's going to be, there's not going to be a place for us to pull off to the right to get into our driveway, our residential roadway. So we are now going to obstruct all of that traffic that was going the direction we were going because they have no way to get around us. And to the last speaker's point, absolutely, when people hit Bethany home, are they going to peel off and speed around it was mentioned earlier, the prudent driver who's setting the speed limit at whatever they feel is appropriate. I feel like this is a solution without a problem to most of the day-to-day driving that I do on Central. I don't think the left-hand turn lane solves anything. And I think that you're actually going to create more congestion from people trying to navigate. This isn't Mill Avenue. This isn't Central and downtown Phoenix.
Thank you so much, Ian. Thank you so much. We're over the 2 minutes. Carl, do you have anything to add from the traffic standpoint about some of his specific questions? And then we will go to Joseph Mulkern and then Christina Wirtz.
So traditionally, kind of as we explained, a two-way left turn lane does allow for left turn vehicles to pull out of any traffic. It also allows space for someone that does want to turn left to turn in and stop and stage to be able to make that additional. Also, as you're turning, now instead of crossing potentially 2 lanes of traffic, you're crossing a single lane of traffic. As far as turning right or anything, it would just be as any other street that has a bike lane and a sidewalk. Yes, you need to yield to any bikers that are coming along and people on the sidewalks.
Thank you, Carl. I am looking for Joseph Mulkern and Christina Wirtz, and I'm not seeing either of them as participants here. So I will go next to Mary Crozier. Mary, you are unmuted now.
Thank you very much. I'm going to ask my questions ahead of time, but then I'd really like an opportunity to shed some light on the history of this that I may have because I've been a resident for a long time. But I'm Mary Crozier. I'm a North Central resident. I actually live on North Central Avenue, and I'm president of our North Central Phoenix Homeowners Association. Back in 2012, nearly 10 years ago, the City of Phoenix reached out to our neighborhood group with the desire to present this possible project to our residents. And after reviewing the impact of the restriping on 12th Street and 15th Avenue, they thought Central Avenue was a good possible option to extend this project there. They came and did a presentation at our annual meeting to our residents back in 2013, over 8 years ago. And 2 years ago, we received another call from the city saying they were going to revisit this concept. It's really unfortunate because our councilman sent out an email with truly false information, obviously not knowing the history of this, and he's had extensive turnover in his office, so I would imagine there's no continuity of thought. But he laid the blame clearly at my feet, which is truly false and unfortunate. He would disparage a constituent. But my question is, first of all, thank you for the comprehensive overview and the project team and all the work you've done on this. I don't know what a buffered bike lane is. I wish someone would describe what that is. I also agree with some of what Alex Malkoon said. I think in addition to this, the other problems in our neighborhood, I love the fact that this reduces the horrific vehicular accident rate we have on our street, drag racing too, and other fatalities. But there's also problems, I think, on 7th Avenue and 7th Street with the digital signage that's not there. How we reduce cut-through traffic in our neighborhood during rush hour. And are we also assessing bus ridership? I see one Valley Metro bus after another going up and down our street with no riders on board. Is that being assessed? And you know, no resident should fear getting rear-ended or in a fatal accident or a near fatal accident when they go pick up their child from school. So I'm all about the safety of it. I don't think it should be just a single project. I think it should be a comprehensive overview of what happens in a mature neighborhood when you have such explosive growth in our city. And
thank you so much, Mary. I'm going to let the project team answer some of your questions, and then we'll go to Paul Block, Reem Haddad, and then Randy Ellickson. Thanks again, Mary. Marielle, were you going to answer like what I think one of the questions was?
Yeah,
bike lanes
I had scrolled through to show the buffered bike lanes, but a buffered bike lane is a bike lane with an additional paint buffer. So it's usually about 2.5 feet of extra space, and that provides more space between the people biking and the people driving to provide a little bit of safety for everyone.
I am not seeing a Paul block. I am seeing a Carol block. Carol, if this was intended to be for the household, perhaps, if you want to let me know in the chat box. I will go to Reem Haddad. Reem, you are unmuted. Reem, you are unmuted, but we cannot hear you. Okay, sorry about that, Reem. I will go to Randy Ellickson, and then Chuck Eaton, and then Joseph Mulkern, and then Christina Wirtz. I'm going to find. And I've seen quite a few questions in the chat box of how many folks are in attendance tonight. At this point, we have over 500, so thank you for your patience with me as I scroll through this list and try to find those folks that had pre-registered to speak. I am not seeing Randy Ellickson and Charles Eaton. I see you. I'm assuming Chuck Eaton is also you. You are unmuted.
Yes, thank you. Thank you. My name is Chuck Eaton. I live between Central and 7th Street on Tucky Lane. You utilize Central and 7th Street to ingress and egress the neighborhood. A lot of my concerns deal with local residents and how this will impact our use of the street systems. I am a professional civil engineer with over 40 years of experience in highway and traffic engineering. The reduced capacity in this street is going to cause serious traffic problems in the whole neighborhood, particularly on 7th Street, 7th Avenue, and on Central Avenue, not including the east-west streets. So the question I have, you mentioned that there was a traffic study done, but the counts were taken in February of 2021, which would not be representative of the typical traffic in this area during COVID. The traffic volumes are gone way down during COVID because people were staying home, but pre-COVID, and I'm sure projecting out post-COVID, it'll paint a whole different picture. So there really needs to be an additional traffic study. I requested public information on the traffic information prior to the meeting and also for design concept studies on it. They said they would be available after the meeting. So my question is, will we be able to review those and comment on the studies that were done to arrive at this solution?
Thank you so much for that question.
Thank you, Chuck. I can answer some of the questions there. So yes, these traffic counts, February of 2021, they were taken during the pandemic. Of course, if we knew the pandemic was going to come and we knew this project was coming this time of year, would we have done the counts ahead of time? Yes. Of course, none of us had a crystal ball, unfortunately. So one of the things to know is that we did look, and Maricopa Association of Governments data indicates that the regional traffic was actually back to pre-pandemic numbers in February of that time frame. So, but what this doesn't take into account is necessarily the specific locations directly, and whether or not local schools were back in class, were in some kind of a hybrid, or were necessarily online only. And those are items that, you know, we are not certain on in many aspects. So, and the other aspect that you asked, yes, there is a format of the study that will be available after this meeting.
And that will be available on the project webpage, I would imagine early next week at the latest, as well as the survey will live there as well. I'm going to go to Donald Carner, and then Kurt Georging, and then Jeremy Thacker. Donald, you are unmuted.
Thank you. My name is Don Carner. I am president of the Coulter Estates Homeowners Association. We're a 68 home complex located at Central Avenue and Montebello. Have concerns over the project. We are in opposition to the project. We disagree with the discussions on safety. Clearly, congestion is going to be increased, and it's, I think, well known that congestion does not improve safety. We're also very concerned with the buses and the garbage collection along Central Avenue and how that's going to be facilitated. The proposed change that was sort of discussed was gone through very quickly. We don't understand what additional changes you're proposing. It seems like one of the lanes is now a full lane for a bus. We could certainly use some more information about that. Central Avenue in this area is very unique, and it is a showcase for the city of Phoenix that is like none other anywhere. And we think it should be left alone. It's perfect the way it is. And if we need bike traffic north-south, there are other proposed, certainly other areas that could be proposed, other routes that would be less congested and have less potential impact on a very unique aspect of the city of Phoenix. We will oppose this up to and including with the city council. Thank you.
Thank you, Don. I am not seeing Kurt on the line. And I am not seeing Jeremy Thacker, Kurt Georging or Jeremy Thacker. I'm not seeing either of you here. I will go to Joshua Matthews, and then Corey Roberg, and then Kathy Wilmer. Joshua, you are unmuted.
Thank you. My name is Joshua Matthews. I'm a resident of Moon Valley and a member of the North Mountain Village Planning Committee. Although I'm not a resident of this corridor, I'm a frequent commuter of Central Avenue from Dunlap to Camelback. Prior to COVID, I would commute 5 times a week to downtown Phoenix, with my typical drive taking me along 7th Street to Camelback and then jumping on the light rail at Central and Camelback Park and Ride. Sometimes I admit when the traffic is heavy on 7th Street, I will take Central Avenue from Dunlap to the Park and Ride, since it is 2 lanes southbound, just like 7th Street. Other times, an accident will occur on 7th Street and traffic ends up getting pushed to Central, and so I end up there either way. Restriping Central Ave to 1 lane southbound and 1 lane northbound will greatly impact my ability to commute to and from my work. It will make it less attractive and will probably lead to me sticking to 7th Street or even going to the 51. And this is why I support the proposed restriping, because drivers like me really shouldn't be using Central Avenue as a cut-through option to speed up our commute. North Central Avenue may be classified as an arterial road, but in reality, it is a neighborhood street meant for local access and low speeds. Most transportation officials will tell you, and we heard it today, a well-designed 2-lane road is better than a poorly designed 4-lane road. The center turn lane will help keep traffic moving, make left-hand turns safer, Bike lanes will help keep the bridle path open for pedestrians, and the street will be safer and more accessible to the community that it serves. The restriping will discourage people like me from using a neighborhood street as if it were a thoroughfare. I urge the community to support this proposal, recognizing the benefits greatly outweigh any perceived traffic congestion issues, and I urge the Streets Transportation Department to proceed with this proposal. Thank you for your time.
Thank you, Joshua. I am now going to go to Tori Roberg. Tori, please go ahead.
Thank you so much. I live at 17th Avenue and Northern. I use Central Avenue as a runner, as a cyclist, and as a commuter. And I am here in support of this project. I wanted to share two stories with you. One is the time that I got ran off the road on Central Avenue and crashed into the canal by motorists who didn't have patience or time for me. It was very scary for me. Thankfully, I crashed into the dirt and not into the street. And it was all because there was no space for my bike, because I ride a road bike, which cannot go on the bridle path. There is no place for a bike like mine except in the lane. So I'm here in support because this is something that is needed. I agree with the previous speaker about Central Avenue should be a residential street. It should be a pleasant place for everybody to be. And I'm just going to leave you with that a friend was actually killed by a motorist on her cycle last week in Colorado where she lived. She was riding in her neighborhood and there was no buffered bike lane for her. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Tori. I'm looking now for Kathy Wilmer. I'm not seeing her. I'm sorry about that, Kathy. I'm not seeing your name registered. I'm going to go now to Sandy Grunnow, and then Stephen Shannon, and then Ann Matlock-Ender. Sandy, you are unmuted.
Yes, can you hear me? Hello?
Yes, please go ahead.
Thank you. My name is Sandy Grunow. I'm with the Phoenix Mid-Century Modern Neighborhood Association. The proposed Central Avenue lane reduction with a center lane will massively increase traffic on 7th Street and 7th Avenue between Bethany and to the Arizona Canal. Drivers will cut through the minor collector streets to avoid Central Avenue, thereby increasing residential traffic. I first heard of this project in 2019. I called the city. The representative stated during the call that 7th Street was already maxed out, which begs these questions. Why is this project being considered when we know it will increase traffic on Central? And how is this being funded? Another question is, what is the accident rate on Central compared to the accident rates on 7th Street and 7th Avenue? And if an effective and less harmful resolution would be to focus on the irrigation ditches to the west of Central Avenue. If these ditches were piped and covered, that reclaimed land would be used by cyclists and walkers. Most of the irrigation ditches in Phoenix were covered years ago with safety as a concern. These ditches are federal property, with Salt River Project being the water provider. Such projects have been successful in other areas of Phoenix because they created walkways and bike paths while removing a hazard and reducing water evaporation. My question is, has the city made contact with the Salt River Project for this consideration? In conclusion, reducing the central traffic lanes is not a good resolution, but detrimental to the surrounding neighborhoods. Covering the irrigation ditches for the bike paths and walkways would benefit everyone, and the lanes would not have to be diminished as you are proposing. Thank you.
Thank you so much, Sandy. There were a few questions in there. Does the project team want to answer? Funding, working with SRP, any of the issues that Ms. Grunow mentioned?
I can jump in on the funding question. So this is a roadway treatment project that's being funded by Transportation 2050, our larger accelerated pavement maintenance program. And so we're really looking at how to stripe the street after these pavement projects happen. So we don't have additional funding for bicycle improvements. We're really looking at when we pave the street, we're going to have to restripe it, or we can either add the stripes back to where they were, or we could propose changes to those stripes. So we're really looking at that question right now, and that's where the funding is, part of our pavement process.
Thanks, Marielle. I'm going to unmute Steve Shannon now. Steve, please go ahead. Steve, we cannot hear you. Steve, you're unmuted. I'm going to go now to Ann Matlock-Ender. I see you as Ann Ender here. Ann, please go ahead. Ann, you are unmuted, but I am not hearing you. And don't worry, anybody that's having issues, we will include all comments and questions received in the chat box as part of this. I'm looking now for Spencer Camps, and I am not seeing him here either. So I am looking now for John Hathaway, and there you are. John, please go ahead.
Thank you. My name is John Hathaway. I live at 125 East Maryland Avenue, and I am an industrial engineer, and I would like to actually put some numbers to this. I actually got some traffic numbers that were published by the city in 2014, and the number of vehicles both northbound and southbound on Central Avenue are 10,000 per day. On 7th Street, it's 16,000 per day. On 7th Avenue, it's 7,000 per day. So if you cut the capacity of Central Avenue by 50%, that's 5,000 cars per day in both directions. Those cars still have to go where they have to go. Where are the 5,000 cars going to go? In flow analysis, we call it dynamic equilibrium. They will find the path of least resistance. Some of them are going to stay on Central Avenue. Some of them are going to move to 7th Street, which is already at capacity. Some of them will move to 7th Avenue, which is nearing capacity. So I want to know what's going to happen to those 5,000 displaced cars. Where are they going to go? How are they going to be accounted for? How are they going to be moving back and forth between 7th Avenue and 7th Street? And so basically, we got a big problem there. Those cars still need to go south or north, wherever they're going to go. Now, to make matters even worse, those are 2014 numbers. Phoenix has grown by 18% since then. So those numbers are probably at least 10% higher. And last week, the Census Bureau announced that Maricopa County is the fastest growing county in the United States. It's growing by 291 people per day. So what we're going to do is cut the capacity of Central Avenue by 50%, cut the entire central corridor by 13%. At the same time, the city is the fastest growing in the country. It makes no sense. This is an accident. This is a perfect storm. So I think we need to reconsider what we're going to do with that traffic. I understand the safety. And oh, by the way, on that 47% reduction in collisions and so on, all of the statistics that were presented there, those are relative statistics. You need to account for the fact that the actual volume on Central per lane will go up. You will not get a 47% reduction in accidents. If the volume within the single lane increases by
Carl, did you want to address any of those things about the study?
Certainly. Thank you for the question. So one thing to note, actually, since 2014, traffic has actually dropped a little bit in Central in this area. And we do actually have overall numbers that were taken in 2019, so prior to the pandemic. Traffic has dropped a little. It's closer to about a little less than 9,000 each direction. So one of the things as well we did, we went to MAG, Maricopa Association of Governments, and had them look at their traffic model. So their model looks at all of the major roads throughout the city. They have Central Avenue as one of those roads. And what they do is they have a number of lanes assigned to each one. And we had them reduce that and see where the traffic went. And it did have traffic dispersed. How the model works is it has all traffic kind of saying, hey, this is where supposedly I'm starting and going, and it transitions everybody and it runs over and over and over until it kind of balances, as traffic in theory does. And we did see increased traffic on 7th Avenue, of course, but we also saw increased traffic on I-17, also on the 51, and other streets as well. So not all of it goes there. And again, what traffic actually does divert, that's hard to say. As far as capacity, typically you can say that in a lane per hour is roughly 1,500 vehicles per hour. During the peak hour right now, Central receives approximately 800. So it does technically have the capacity. The signals create some limitations with that.
Thanks, Carl. I'm going to go to Michael Stenner, and then I'm going to try to go back to Andrew Smigelski and then Ann, that both entered their chat to me and said their mics might be working now. But Michael Stenner, please go ahead.
Yes, thank you. My name is Mike Stenner, and I live at 114 East Griswold Road. And I happen to live on one of those streets that everybody wants to jump down east and west from 7th Street to Central. So my question is, when are you going to take us serious? We have an issue with speeding. We have issue with too much traffic at the rush hour times. And now you're going to reduce traffic on Central and push all that traffic onto my street. Come and take a look for yourselves instead of looking at these models, okay? I want to know what you're going to do about the issues of east and west traffic. Thank you.
Thank you, Mike. I'm going to go to Andrew Smigelski. Andrew?
Hello, this is Andrew Smigelski. I am a registered civil engineer and I specialize in traffic engineering. I own a traffic engineering company here in the Valley. And since February, I've probably taken about $60,000 to $75,000 worth of traffic counts here across the Valley. And while I agree the statement that was earlier that said the traffic counts are starting to come back to normal, what I'm surprised at is, and what I'd like to ask, the study that's going to happen, it really needs to take, will it take traffic counts during school? And school is out for the season. School is out in February. And looking at the traffic counts on the City of Phoenix map right now, it does show that in the 2014 counts, there's 19,000 vehicles on Central Avenue in this section. So will this study address that? And also my second question, my office is on Central Avenue in Clarendon. I drive Central Avenue almost every day, and I've driven it for the last 18 years, and I've seen light rail go in. When the lane was taken out from between Bethany and Camelback, there was an instant congestion that started, and it's northbound traffic, and it begins in the afternoon, and it stretches to past Indian School over a mile because of one lane that was removed. Now, that same issue is going to happen at Bethany, and will that study take into account the lack of capacity, actually the removal of capacity for less than 5% of the users?
Thank you, Andrew. King, did you have anything while I look for Ann Ender?
We're going to jump in on that, Carl, at all? Or do you want me to?
Go ahead, Kenny.
I think to answer that, Andrew, I think, we as Carl noted, we've taken traffic counts. We've looked at the analysis of that. But, if there's a need for us to do additional traffic counts or modeling, we will do that. But I think one of the things I want to emphasize with this proposal we have this evening is really we're not debating whether there's not going to be potentially be traffic impacts with making a decision like this, but we're also talking about there's pros and cons to making a decision like this, whether you're looking at it from a bicycling perspective, whether you're looking at it from a traffic perspective. So I want to make sure that's clear. There's we're not trying to present it as being this, we could do something like this and there's no potential, everything is all positive out of it. What we're doing is having a conversation with the community, the public, to understand, help them understand what there might be issues with if we go this route, or what the benefits might be, so we can get accurate and good information and feedback from the residents about this proposal.
Thank you, Keeney. I'm going to try Ann Ender again, see if her mic is up. Ann, you are unmuted. And we still cannot hear you. Sorry about that. A friendly reminder to everyone to please keep their comments less than 2 minutes, 1 to 2. We still have a lot of folks that have pre-registered, and to please focus on questions that the project team can answer for you. I'm looking now for Mark McFate, and I am not seeing him. I'm going to go now to Errol Sweet, and then Beryl Sweet, and then Posey Nash. I'm not seeing Errol, but I do see Beryl. So Beryl, you are now unmuted.
Here I am.
You're not on the.
I'm on Errol's on her computer. Can you see me?
No.
We can hear you, yes.
Okay, so here's the important thing. No one has talked about 3rd Avenue. I used to be a runner. I'm 78. I'm a walker now. 3rd Avenue has doggy walkers, leisure walkers. It has bicyclists, and it has students. Students drive from north to All Saints and Meadows every day, 3 and 4 abreast. When you have increased congestion on Central, like an accident or so, there's more traffic on 3rd Avenue. There's no sidewalks except for 3 blocks on 3rd Avenue.
Between Northern and Glendale.
Between Northern and Glendale. There's no cars parked on both sides. Students travel on 3rd Avenue because the only crossway of Glendale is at 3rd Avenue. So my question is, I think your safety concerns are way off. You have a perfect storm for more accidents. And if you open a bike path, 10-year-olds and 11-year-olds might be competing with cars on the way to school.
This is Beryl Sweet. May I put in my 1 to 2 minutes now?
Please go ahead.
Okay, thank you. I think as a resident of North Central, I've been in the same house on Kaler and 3rd Avenue for 42 years. I think I've probably turned right on Kaler to Central tens of thousands of times. And I wonder if you've considered this scenario. One lane is going south during rush hour. The cars on Kaler are stacking up, waiting to turn right, much less the ones coming from the east side that are waiting to somehow bleed into that center lane and wait. So you have a pedestrian on the corner wanting to cross the street to get to the bridle path. You have the cars waiting to turn right, and you have a constant stream during rush hour in that one lane. If 2 lanes worth of traffic are in that one lane, it's going to be rare that there's going to be a break in that traffic for a car to turn right, for a car to come from the center lane and bleed into that traffic. And how about the pedestrians? That crosswalk on Orangewood at Central, it was a great idea, but if you've ever tried to cross Central at Orangewood, you notice that most of the cars do not stop for you. So in order to cross Central as a pedestrian, we have to walk all the way to Central or to Glendale, or all the way to Northern to get to the bike path. So I think, as many people have said, the impact on the residents of this community and those of us who have been here and love the environment of North Central would be sorely impacted by this change, and I'm very much against it.
Thank you so much, Errol and Beryl Street. I did see that Anne did send me a chat in the chat box, although her mic wasn't working, and her question was, will the buses be able to completely pull out of the travel lane?
So the buses will be pulling into the bike lanes, just like they do throughout the rest of the city. The buffered bike lane and the bike lane will be about 7.5 feet wide. A bus is wider than that, but because of the center turn lane, cars will be able to maneuver around the bus and get around the bus if it is stopped to let people off or pick them up. At the major intersections, we will have that shared bus bike lane. So just at the very major intersections where there is a traffic signal, there will be room for the bus to pull over completely and it will be totally out of the traffic lane.
Panelists, please chime in if there's any other questions that you hear as we're going through. I am going to unmute Posey Nash, and then I will go to Jackie Rich, Sandra Thompson, and then Dominic Dry. Posey, please go ahead.
Thank you. One of the things that your drawings have not addressed, and I'm past president of the North Central Phoenix Homeowners Association and also served on Alhambra Village Planning Committee. One of the things that all the drawings of this proposed change, which I don't really like, does not address is signage. On 7th Avenue and 7th Street, there are signs all over the streets. Don't use this lane. Okay, 6 to 9. What kind of signage are you going to have to apply to this application, and how unsightly is that going to be? Thank you.
Thank you so much for the question. Carl, do you have a response on signage? Actually, I'm not seeing Carl. I suppose there could be technological issues. Brianna or project team, do we want to answer?
Sure. I don't anticipate a lot of additional signage. Obviously, we would have bike lane signage associated with the bike lane. But other than that, I think I had seen a comment in the chat box related to signage similar to 7th Avenue and 7th Street, which would not be the case. So it should just be bike signage. And just so you know, Ashley, I think there were some internet connections and several panel members were dropped off.
Virtual meeting casualties, I suppose. Thank you, Brianna. Jackie Rich, you are now unmuted.
Hello, and thank you very much. I'm going to focus on my questions. First of all, I really support anything that makes the streets safer. Long-time resident and active in my neighborhood. My first question is, was any consideration given to the drop-offs and lines caused by parents dropping off kids at the schools and or churches? I don't know whether traffic backs up on that, but it's something that I would be concerned about because of the number of churches and schools along Central Avenue. That's question number one. Question number two, was any consideration given to all of the increased traffic caused by the large apartment buildings that are getting approved all up and down 7th Street, which are no doubt creating more traffic on 7th Street, but I could very well see spill over to other streets in the area. That's been a big concern for a lot of neighbors. And then the third thing is, I think it's great that you have the buffered bike paths, and as somebody who likes to ride a bike but is really hesitant to do it because of safety, I feel a lot safer on a bike path that has barriers between me and the cars that are zipping by. And that's something that I've noticed as being absent from most Phoenix bike lanes. And so I'm interested in knowing more about that. Thank you.
Thank you so much, Jackie. Panelists?
Mary, I'll take the first two and then you can take the third one. So on the first two questions, no, there was not any consideration taken into consideration in regarding the drop-off and pickups during the school times. In addition to the analysis did not include future growth within the area as well.
Great. And for the third question, this is a pavement project, so we are looking at just striping. We are, as it's citywide, as a department, we are looking at opportunities to add vertical protection when possible, but for this project, because of the driveways and because it's a pavement project, it was not a consideration, unfortunately.
I'm going now to Sandra Thompson. Sandra, please go ahead.
Hi, this is Sandy Thompson. I live on Lamar Road between Glendale and Bethany, and it's a one-way egress onto 7th Avenue and the suicide lane. So I have a question and a statement. So have you done a survey about how many bicyclists use Central Avenue during the week between Bethany Home and the Canal? And my second is a statement, and that is the city has established the Sonoran Bikeway on 3rd Avenue, which I walk regularly, which is used by walkers and cyclists, very little traffic, which is far superior to anything on Central Avenue and safer. So would you please address that?
Thank you, Sandy. Panel?
So as we look at our active transportation network, we look at a variety of different ways for people to travel through the area. And I want to emphasize that this is something that we're looking at on Central Avenue because it is tied to a pavement project, and it is something that we've heard resident requests from. So it's not a substitute for 3rd Avenue. It's another opportunity for increasing safety and increasing options in our transportation network.
Thanks, Marielle. I'm not seeing Dominic Dry or Martin Arita. I'm going to go now to Mac Reagan, and then Thomas Howard, and then Daniel Kusher. And please, we still have over a dozen folks that we ought to get to. So please, questions only, focus on questions that the panelists can ask, and no more than 2 minutes. Mac, please go ahead.
Hey folks, can you hear me? Good. Okay, so first of all, just want to thank you, Ashley and Keeney, for hosting tonight, and thank you for taking a data-based approach to this project and explaining that data to us. Just 3 questions that stand out to me. The first one is, what is happening, what is going to be done to encourage traffic off of Central so that these backups don't occur? We know that the models will show that folks don't follow there, but just in the beginning stages of this project, once it's complete, what will encourage folks off of the street? Second one is lighting on Central Avenue. Presumably, it's going to be even more dark on the street with less cars and with a big bike lane. So what will be done for lighting to light up that bike lane, light up the street, just so that it is safe even in the evening hours and at night and early morning? And then lastly, what are the considerations, and have there been any considerations for speed limit reductions on the street, as it will be going to 1 lane in each direction? And my perspective on this is that I am a cyclist that uses Central Avenue to ride my bike. I'm a road cyclist, like the earlier commenter, excuse me. And so, you know, Central is incredibly dangerous, and in fact, cycling in the inner city, if you will, is incredibly dangerous. And so I find myself having to go to Scottsdale or put my car on my bike and leave. So it would be terrific to be able to have some of these safety questions answered so that we can feel safe as cyclists on this road.
Thank you, Mac.
Yeah, thank you. I'll try to take all 3 of those questions real quick. The first one about encouraging traffic to move off of Central on this. I think one of the things we don't know yet, and we've been pretty kind of honest about this, is we're not sure what level of diversion of traffic will happen and what percentage of traffic will be diverted off of Central after these changes, if these changes were to be made. And I think there's things that we pointed out as far as there might be greater efficiencies with having a center turn lane that be able to reduce that weaving effect and reduce some of the stopping that happens when people turn. So I think one of the things we want to evaluate, if on any case like this, and we did something like this recently on actually Hatcher Road, where we looked at something similar, like a 2-lane in each direction without a center turn lane, where we changed that to a 1-1-1. And we do evaluate how traffic operates after a change like that. So we can kind of see what the levels of traffic are, what the behaviors are. So we would monitor that and that's something we would do in normal kind of situations when we do a change like this. So we didn't do anything actively to encourage Central Avenue traffic to leave Central Avenue. The second one about lighting. Right now, we don't have any plans for additional lighting in there. Lighting is one of those concerns that we would want to have a discussion further with the community about, because that could change the character of the roadway in that stretch. So that's something we would want to entertain. Right now, we don't have a funding or a project moving forward looking at lighting. The third one about speed limit. We did have a recent speed limit change on Central Avenue in this stretch. I think it was back in June of last year, but I think it actually didn't get posted until I think January of this year. But there has been a speed limit change that was made just recently on Central Avenue in this stretch.
Thanks, Keeney. I'm going to go to Thomas Howard and then Daniel Kusher and then Mark Cosmas. Tom Howard, please go ahead.
Yeah, my name is Tom Howard. I moved into Rancho Solano about 17 years ago, and it is a wonderful neighborhood. It's contiguous to this particular project. I am concerned because there's a significant amount of cut-through traffic that occurs, particularly around the school hours. Thousands of students go to school between Sunny Slope and Central, and a lot of them transition through the neighborhood. Is there any, heard about traffic studies that have been done and projections from other traffic studies, is there any intent to do additional traffic studies? And if there is, would those traffic studies, could they focus rather than just on Central? Could they look at what would happen peripherally in the peripheral neighborhoods, particularly around the time when schools open and schools close?
So I would respond to that we don't have any plans. If this was to move forward, we wouldn't have any larger plans to kind of study the traffic on those side streets. But that is something we do work with the neighborhoods. If we do see cut through traffic or speeding or things like that happen in those neighborhoods, we do work with them, work with neighborhoods to evaluate those results, and so we can get a better idea of what the issues are on those roadways. We do have programs like speed hump, speed cushion programs. We have time of day turn restriction programs as well that we can look at for traffic mitigation that may be applicable here if that were the case, if this were to be implemented. But we don't have any plans right now to do any corridor wide or side street wide additional traffic studies on this.
Thanks, Keeney. Daniel Kusher, I am unmuting you.
Thanks. This is probably appropriate follow-up question to the last one. Thanks for the opportunity. I love this concept in theory, the bike lanes enhance neighborhood feel, but I really question the comment just now that the simulations don't take into account traffic diversion through the local streets. And this is my concern because I live just south of the busy Central and Glendale intersection and already see traffic diverting down the street to jump ahead of that heavy backed up intersection. So cars can already stack back into the neighborhood. So my question is, why are the neighborhood street level studies not mandatory to evaluate the effect this project's going to have on the local residential street traffic? Thank you.
Yeah, I know that Carl's not on and he's a better traffic engineer and answer these questions than me, but I would probably address from the standpoint when these models do predict kind of diversion, but it isn't known exactly how much that would be. It estimates it out, but when it comes down to it is knowing what exactly the diversion is and what those impacts are. And like I said, that's something that we work through, but if we were to move through this, that's something we can consider. And looking at the traffic diversion elements, we'd want to look at that. But there's no plans right now to do them. But I agree that when you're looking at diversion, we just don't know. With the models may predict something, but that may not be actually what ends up happening, if that makes sense. What we try to do is focus in on these impacts and what they would do to travel delays along Central Avenue or a corridor like this. But I hear your concern and I hear your thoughts, and that's something we can share with the team and see what we can do when we're considering these, to be able to look at those kind of those impacts and better evaluate them. But they are, I mean, there are something we would have to look in real time, not necessarily in modeling.
Thanks, Keeney. I'm going to go to Mark Cosmas, Michael Wade, Barney McShane, and then Chris Crates. Mark, please go ahead.
Hi, my name is Mark Cosmas. I've lived within eyesight of the bridle path for 50 years. My main concern, I'm at 3rd Street and Ocotillo, Lawrence. And my main concern is cut through traffic. And I don't think there's actually anything wrong with Central, but has anyone thought about how many offset streets are on Central? And if I'm going northbound and I want to turn left on State, and you're going southbound and you want to turn left on Northview, we run into each other in that turning lane. We're both stuck and neither of us can move. And I did the bridle path this morning, and there's 15 of those cases up and down Central Avenue, and it just doesn't work. So I am opposed to this and would like your comments on that situation. Thank you.
I would say when we look at two-way left turn lanes, that's a standard detail in most of our city streets around. I'm on our collector streets and our arterial streets. So that's something that whether you're talking driveways, whether you're talking about intersecting streets with those roadways, we do have, with those two-way left turns, you are going to have conflicting turning movements at times. It doesn't necessarily have to be in an offset intersection. It could be conflicting driveways. But so that is something that's a reality. I mean, that happens all over the city. But you'll find when you have those conflicting turning movements, you're not going to be, from a safety perspective, have high speed or serious injury or fatality accidents that come out of that. But we have this all over the city, and people are able to adjust and move around those kind of conflicts. But so it isn't necessarily unique where you might have an offset intersection or an offset driveway. People going north and south or east to west are going to have that conflict with those two-way left turn lanes, but drivers work around that.
Michael Wade, you are unmuted.
Yes, I live between Glendale and Northern on 3rd Avenue, and several people have commented on the impact on 3rd Avenue. Am I correct in assuming that a safety study has not been done of the impact on the side streets?
At this point in time, there hasn't been a study on the impact of the side streets, safety or otherwise, or traffic otherwise. Correct.
Okay, thank you.
Barney McShane, you are unmuted.
Thank you. Thanks for the opportunity. I've listened to a number of the people tonight, especially the engineers who have asked some very good questions. And my concerns are a lot of the same concerns that the engineers have, that they've asked the questions. And my other thing is, my question to you guys is that you go to propose something like this, pretty major change to a pretty special road in a pretty special area, and they ask about if any of these other studies were done, and the answer is no, 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 no. That really concerns me. Personally, I wrote a small paragraph and have got a lot of very positive responses from it from the North Central area. I sent it down to one of the councilmen. I think this is a very ill-conceived and misconceived project. I don't feel like you've done enough of your research to really propose this. And the other thing is that I live in the area too. I live off of Central and Bethany. I know what happens when there's a block up and when there's traffic. I've traveled 7th Street with my kids to school for years, up and down. I know the nightmare that 7th Avenue and 7th Street are. And when you want to take this amount of traffic off Central for a one-lane turning lane and some bike paths, I think once you do your study and you get your research, you're going to find It is not supported by the majority of people, and I'm disappointed that it's got to this point. Safety concerns, yes. Where are the accident studies for what's happened on Central so far? These questions pulling in and out off Central, the answers are not very good. I can't feel good about a project like this, and I think you haven't done one thing to think about what you're doing to the neighbors, the streets, the neighborhood, the traffic, people dropping off, picking up kids at school, kids on bicycles, and people in the neighborhoods. People rush through these neighborhoods when there's one blockage on Central or Bethany or Glendale. I'm frustrated with your project, very ill-conceived, disappointed that I have to say that. I'm active in my neighborhood. I'm active with Block Watch. I help Phoenix Police. I've done an awful lot of things. So to see this thing be thrown up like this, and the questions even in your surveys, you can't quite give the exact answers. I hope you get the chats. If I'm wrong, I'm wrong, but I don't think so. Thank you for your time.
Thank you so much, Barney. And I do want to reiterate to everybody, there are hundreds of, maybe more, of chats coming in, and we are going to be recording all of them as part of this process. I'm going to go to, I'm looking for Chris Rates, and I'm not seeing anyone with that last name, so I'm going to go now. I'm looking for Henry Harding, and I'm not seeing a Henry. I'm looking for James Martinez, and I'm not seeing anybody in that name either. We have had quite a few folks drop off in the last couple minutes. I'm looking now for Mike Moore. Michael Moore, I see you, and you are unmuted.
Yes, I'm Michael Moore. My wife and I have lived here in the Phoenix area for the last 20 years. We've enjoyed our drive into downtown, where we worked. And we're really not happy with the idea of squeezing down the traffic, especially on the top part of Central past Northern, where Central kind of dead ends anyway. The majority of traffic that already passes through is going to pass through on 7th Street and 7th Avenue. And so what traffic that we have on Central now seems to me to be residential traffic and not so much traffic passing through. And so I don't see the big advantage. But what I'd also like to know is why there's a big push for bicycle lanes, excuse me, in an area where we already have the bridle path and we already have pretty wide lanes. It seems to me that we could maybe widen the street a little bit more to add them without actually having to lose traffic lanes to the traffic. The other question or comment I'd like to make is also in the years that we've lived here, Central is not an area with high traffic accident rate, or at least we don't feel that it is. And so we're also wondering, is there really this big push for safety, or is there something else behind the reason that we want to reduce the amount of traffic that's on Central now?
Yeah, I'll take that. I think the main thing I'd like to touch on, which I know we touched on and Mariel touched on as well, is that in 2015 when the Phoenix voters voted in Transportation 2050 or Proposition 104, that was to add more than 1,000 new bike lane miles across the city. So those bike lane miles have to go in different streets, and so this is one of the proposals to look at opportunities to be able to do that here. You mentioned the bridle path there as well as the bike lanes, but I think it was noted by one of the speakers before that the use on a bridle path may not be the same as the use on a bike lane that's on a asphalt roadway. And I would note that even in some of our newer streets that we're building, where we might have a multi-use path or a path off the street in addition to a bicycle lane. But this project right now, as you mentioned about widening the street, we're not planning on widening the street in Central in this area. The intent was to be able to see what we could do to be able to utilize the asphalt that we have, the width of the asphalt, in a different fashion. And that's why we're having this meeting, to be able to talk about it.
Thank you. I was looking for Ronald Faust, and I did not find him, nor did I find Wayne Struble, but please know your input will be accepted in a variety of other forms. I'm going to unmute now Mary Mulligan, and then I'm going to go to Brad Schauer and then Hannah Quinsley. Mary, please go ahead.
Hi, I'm Mary Mulligan. I live at 125 East Maryland Avenue. I want to say the Central Corridor is known for having multiple generations of families living in these neighborhoods over the years. I know a lot of people whose families have been here since the 1920s. 5 generations of my family have lived in the North Central Corridor since 1953. And I think it's a very interesting survey because the responses were clearly structured to meet someone else's end goals, but not really it wasn't really from the vantage point of neighbors who live here, have lived here for generations or for long periods of time and know the area well. I think if they had designed the survey, we would have seen some very different questions tonight. I would like to make another point. When I walk along Central Avenue south of Bethany Home, where you do have a well-designed, well-marked bike lane, just about every time I walk there, I encounter bicycles on the sidewalk and they're going in both directions. So I want to know, why do you expect that it's going to be any different north of Bethany Home? My third point is Marielle Brown stated she was making the comparison between the width of the bus compared to the bike lane, and she mentioned that people passing the bus will be able to use a portion of the center lane. But right now, we see, even when buses are in a full lane, that there are people who will wait behind a bus. So I don't see how you can control this. What's your plan to address that? Another question, this is a scenario I'd like to pose. Say you have grade school kids on the east side. We have a lot of kids that ride bikes to Madison Meadows and to All Saints. So let's say you have grade school kids on the east side of Central Avenue who need to cross Central Avenue safely so that they can head southbound to school. Are those kids going to have to travel northbound along the bike lane to get to a major intersection where they can cross safely to access a southbound lane? And I'd like to say also that this process, I think, has been slanted against people that have difficulty using technology. I think a lot of people would not have been able to access WebEx tonight. I'm only able to do it because I have someone here in my living room helping me with it. But I think the survey is also not going to be accessible to a lot of people that would have significant input. And I think at the end of the
Mary,
night,
we're
you'll be
over
able
2 minutes, but thank you very much for that. And I will add, we do have the survey available in other formats if you call the project hotline. So anybody that has a phone is able to participate in the meeting and call the hotline. Project team, is there anything else you wanted to add? I'm looking next for Brad Schauer. Brad, you
I do want to clarify.
Oh, go ahead, Marielle.
I just wanted to clarify the bus comment. So what I was saying is that the bus would be able to pull into the buffered bike lane. That's what happens already throughout the city. At that point, although the bus is a little bit wider than the buffered bike lane, the majority of the travel lane will be open. And a car is typically about 6 to 7 feet wide. It's not a full 10-foot wide travel lane. With the added width of the center turn lane right there, the car will only have to go a foot out of its way, if even, to get around the bus. So just to clarify that, it's not that the bus will be in the travel lane.
I'm going to unmute Bradley Schauer now. Bradley, go ahead.
Yeah, I'm here. Thanks. Yeah, my name's Brad Schauer. I've been in North Central Phoenix for coming up on 40 years. And I guess my big picture question is this just seems like a foregone conclusion. It seems like there's money to be spent. There's something pushing it towards this. And so I'm trying to figure out if that's really the case, and that we need to have a different discussion, because none of the residents, none of the people who live in the neighborhood have supported it. All of the information that we're hearing seem to be, I agree with what somebody said a while back. This whole presentation appears to have been very slanted, right? We haven't done any research on 3rd Avenue, 3rd Street. We talked about decreasing collisions, decreasing speed, but I've got 3 young daughters who use the bridle path, who use 3rd Street, walk the dogs, use their bikes, etc. And it's shocking to me that we'd be considering this without a study on what might happen to my daughters walking, as they walk the dogs down the street, and what increased risk there is to them. I can tell you as a trial lawyer, pretty much write a blank check from the city to whomever for not studying that before we try to even consider something like this. So that's my question. Is that it's sort of inconceivable to me that we're here having this discussion with this little information on the impact to the actual neighbors that is contemplated by this. And I get that there's individual people or things who this might work pretty well for, but as a neighborhood as a whole, this just seems like an absolute disaster to the safety of the kids, the neighborhoods, the dogs, everybody running around, bicyclists on the residential side of things. So I guess that's my long-winded way of getting to the question, which is this just something the city's decided to do, and they put on a presentation that's clearly aimed towards pushing that, not to presenting the information truly pros and cons both way? And so that's my question, because I couldn't be more opposed to this concept as a longtime resident.
Well, thank you. I'll just jump in and mention some I've already said before, and I know we've talked about in the presentation the time before this, that this is not a foregone conclusion. The whole point of us doing a public meeting like this is really to get people's feedback and input on it, to share information about potentially pros and cons of doing a change like this. And so if it's slanted that way, that's not the intent. We're here to be able to get input from the public.
Thanks, Keeney. I was looking for Hannah Quincy and I'm not seeing her, but I did find David Ware. David, you are unmuted.
Can you hear me okay?
Yes, please go ahead.
Well, firstly, I'd like to address Keeney. Ever since you guys started talking tonight, you referred to this as the project, not the proposal. It seems to me like every question that's been asked, every survey that's been done, the information you've all gathered has been incomplete, except to support your project. As somebody that lives on a dead-end street off North Central Avenue, I find it pretty much of an attack to know that there's no way that I can get out of this neighborhood without dealing with your have-to proposal in order to gain a couple of bike lanes. And people like myself that are going to jump out on Central, getting an automatic traffic jam at all hours of the morning and especially in the afternoon during rush hour and when the schools are in session south of Glendale Avenue, the first thing we're going to do is try to get off Central Avenue. So all the people similar to myself are going to cut through the neighborhoods. And so all of you that are talking about safety and how, you want, biking to be safe on Central Avenue, think about what it's going to create for the children that play in the streets and the side neighborhoods. And we'll have nowhere to go other than to get in a traffic jam. Think about the amount of time it's going to take to get from Central Avenue in Glendale or Northern just a couple of miles to drop off kids. This is an attack on North Central residents. Your data that you've got has obviously been collected during COVID so that it could minimize the amount of traffic that's actually here. In my opinion, you should be ashamed of yourself and you should provide some objective information and data for us. And I would say go back and do it again next year when the schools are in session and take all these requests for other information that's actually accurate and pertinent and then give it to us. This getting thrown down our throats is not fun, and you guys should be ashamed of yourself, and that's all I have to say.
I'm going now to Jill Goldsmith. Jill, you are unmuted.
Yes, thank you. I've been a longtime resident of North Central, and I have a few questions. First, given the fact that buses as well as the watering trucks stop on Central will actually block part of the through lane, isn't it true that it will slow traffic because they have to scoot and see if it's safe to go around? More importantly, is it legal, in fact, to use a center turn lane as a through lane? Third, have you evaluated the speed of that? Additionally, the Complete Streets policy states that it's the goal to create a more sustainable transportation system that is safe and accessible for everyone. And it also states that it's to benefit our children by creating safe routes to school. Finally, this Complete Streets policy states that projects are to be tailored to the needs of the community with regard to the surrounding land uses and the street character, allowing selection of facilities and amenities best suited to the needs of the community, not just a few Central Avenue residents. Isn't it true that the failure to do any broad study or evaluation looking at the impact for the through streets, the 3rd Avenue, 3rd Street, 7th Street, and 7th Avenue might actually violate the Complete Streets policy? Additionally, I know that every time that there's an accident or any blockage on Central, they come down 3rd Avenue. 3rd Avenue is used by bike commuters from the Arizona Canal south to Bethany, where they pick up that bike lane. Children ride 5 abreast, everybody from northern to Glendale, 7th Avenue to Central. All children come onto 3rd Avenue riding 5 abreast to take the crossing guard, use the crossing guard to get to Meadows and All Saints. This will violate the complete streets policy because they will no longer be safe. Remember, people park their cars on 3rd Avenue as well, narrowing that lane. I can tell you as a 3rd Avenue resident for 26 years that as soon as something happens on Central, we become a freeway despite our speed bumps. So my concern is, isn't a lot of this policy or this project, in fact, a violation of the complete streets policy? Isn't the suggestion that cars are supposed to scoot around the buses and watering trucks, potentially making them liable for using the center turn lane illegally? And won't it slow the traffic down while people see if in fact they can get around? So those.
Thanks, Jill. We're over 2 minutes. Project team?
I would just probably highlight that the concern she's talking about, I mean, what we're proposing here, or what's being proposed for this stretch of Central Avenue is no different than what we have in other areas of the city, where we have 1 lane in each direction and a center turn lane, where we have bike lanes and buffered bike lanes. It's not a unique concept that we're talking about here. It may be unique to this section of Central because Central hasn't had that, but the questions you asked, whether it's buses or people getting around those vehicles, that happens in other areas of the city where you have 1 lane in each direction and center turn lane and bike lanes. So it's not unique.
I'm going to go to Ben Doramy and then Steve Shannon. Ben, please go ahead.
Thank you, Ashley, for hosting tonight, and thank you to the panelists. I pretty much echo what everyone's already said. I'm a longtime resident of North Central Phoenix. I've been down here over 25 years. My question to you, the panelists tonight, can you, with a straight face and 100% confidence as a human, tell the attendees that the studies you've done are in the best interest of the residents? The other question I have is traffic east and westbound along northern, central, Glendale, Bethany. Those studies haven't been done. And I know that some AI sensors have been installed along Glendale Avenue between 16th Street and 7th Avenue. And that seemed to streamline a little bit. But have you done any studies to take into consideration the new AI technology that's being installed in the neighborhood? Also, it sounds, we know for a fact, because you've told us, you haven't really done studies sufficient enough to submit a proposal like this to the community. It's like a firefighter going into a fire with just his or her underwear on. It doesn't work, and it's not going to work. So do you have the money to spend and do the studies that need to be taken in order to make a fully informed decision on this project? Another question I have is, you say, well, we work with the community there if there's some flow into the arterial streets. Well, that's great. It sounds good. We hear the buzzwords: intent, community, inclusiveness. North Central Phoenix in general is one of the most inclusive neighborhoods, I think, in Phoenix, let alone Arizona. Secondly, my questions is if you do care, why would you come in with the data you currently have and do such a project and then just kind of take care of the fallout? It's kind of putting the cart before the horse when the cart's not fully prepared. So what is the city's plan to take care of that? Two, we hear about all this modeling and the scenarios. Well, what variables does the algorithm take into consideration when you're running your models? Because clearly it's like any other machine, garbage in, garbage out. And the studies, like I said, have not been done that need to be. So the information being put into these models is inaccurate, it's outdated, it's not current, and it doesn't take into consideration future growth.
Thank you, Ben. We're far over 2 minutes. Project team?
I'll kind of just jump in there and just say, we have done studies on this area, and the primary way we were looking at the studies is when we're reducing a lane of traffic, what does it do to that street and the traffic on that street? And as I said before at the beginning of the presentation, is we're not going to say that you can reduce a lane of traffic and it's going to have no negative impacts. It's going to have some benefits and it's going to have some negative aspects. We've gone through those different pros and cons. And so it really became, as we talked about before, it's a value judgment. What type of street do you want to see Central Avenue between Bethany Home and the Arizona Canal? The 2 lanes in each direction today that exist today, or potentially a 1 lane in each direction with a center turn lane with bike lanes. And that's really the proposition today. To talk, I mean, we can debate and say you should have had studies about cut through traffic and things like that. Those are impacts. Like I said, we're not saying there aren't potentially impacts to reducing lanes of traffic on there, but we're doing the study and the analysis begin with to be able to show, hey, can Central Avenue support potentially the reduction of lanes on here, and we'll potentially have some improvements if you add a 2-way left turn in there. So I don't know if Carl, if you have anything else to add on that, but I wanted to put it out from a standpoint. I know it is at the end of the day a value judgment of what the residents, businesses, property owners along Central Avenue, commuters who use it, what they would like to see in Central Avenue.
I'm going to go now to Steve Shannon, and then we will hear a few closing remarks from Keeney, as well remind everyone how to provide additional input on this project. Steve Shannon, you are unmuted.
Okay, thanks so much. Hi, friends and neighbors. I've lived in the neighborhood over 60 years. I'm a general contractor. We built a few things for the city, including terminals 2 and 4 at the airport. This is a bad idea for our children. It may be great for the bikers, but it will be horrible for our kids. We need to mobilize to fight this. I'll contribute $10,000 today to start this. I'll start a web page to help organize all the neighbors who pay taxes here who don't want to support this. You can find it at shannon.com. I'll put it up tomorrow. Thank you all for your thoughts.
Thank you, Steve. That concludes the list that we received from those that had emailed our consultant, Albert Granillo, our community manager there, as well as called the project hotline. Marielle, if you want to go to the next slide. So we will provide an FAQ on the project website next week. The recording will also be available early next week. So please share this link, Phoenix.gov/streets/lane changes. You can also call the project hotline with any comments and questions, and the survey will be up through June 11th. Keeney, did you want to wrap up with some closing remarks?
Thanks, Ashley. I want to thank everybody for participating this evening. I want to thank my team for being here and putting together this presentation. I want to thank you, Ashley, as well. But everybody who was involved on this call, whether you were a resident, a commuter, business owner, property owner, whatever your interest in the project is, I want to thank you for being here and participating in this process. I will reiterate again at the closing, this is not a done deal. This is the idea here is to be able to talk about a proposal and how you want to see Central Avenue in the future. If you feel one way versus another way, I encourage you to fill out the survey, whether you provided an email input, whatever kind of input you provided in the past, or present, or you're going to do before the survey closes. I encourage you to do that. We will take that into account when we're making an ultimate determination on what we're going to do when we restripe Central Avenue after the paving projects that we have. So like I said, I want to thank everybody for part of this. And I would just emphasize one of the things that we're tasked with as well as not just managing traffic around the entire city, but when we're talking about bike lanes, is be able to make sure we have a connected, safe, comfortable transportation network for all users, which includes bike lanes, for pedestrians, and for vehicle drivers. So that's what we're tasked with. And so that's why we're here talking about this tonight, to be able to figure out, when working with the public and with the community, what their values are when it comes to this and what decisions we want to make going forward to how Central Avenue will look in the future. So, but I want to thank you again. Have a great evening.